Welcome to Transitions 2. I am Martiqua, and my friend Dr. Diane Kelly is here with me today. And we are going to continue our series in Transitions 2 on gender transition, either on the job or not. And Diane is going to do a little presentation for us today that might give you a few giggles and give you some fun things to laugh at.
Thank you, Martiqua. I wrote this program with the transgender group out of Winnipeg, Canada.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and get started.
All right.
Persons beginning their gender transition. No one's going to talk you out of it, right? No one. You're serious about it. You know that only 6% of transsexuals ever make it to the operating table. And 94% get stuck along the way. Why does this happen? Let's look at the causes. Those that don't succeed, what happens to them? They revert back to their earlier roles after a strong start, or others end up in an endless loop. No way forward, no way back. Hormones have made non-reversible changes in their body. They can't go back. But yet they don't have the money to continue the transition and get the surgery. So they're stuck in an endless loop. Why? Anyone can complete a gender transition. Anybody. They need a plan, a blueprint to work with. They need to do their homework on this one. People tend to, it's hard work. It takes years to accomplish. And people want to rush this, and they're impatient, and we're in a society that we want it all and we want it now. You've seen that commercial. It's my money and I want it now. And we're very impatient as a society.
Indeed.
So, where do we put the blame when it fails? Is it the doctor? How about the family? The government. Society did it to me. Wrong answer. No, no. The person who is transitioning. They tend to undermine themselves. And there's 10 different ways that they do it. 10 ways that we came up with. Number 1, being unemployed. Oh, money makes the world go round. You don't have money, I can tell you what, welfare sure as heck isn't going to pay for that gender transition. And it takes a great deal of money. I mean, stop and think about it. You got electrolysis, hours and hours and hours of electrolysis. Now, I don't know what you pay for electrolysis here, but I know in St. Cloud it's like $34 an hour, which is not bad. That's cheap compared to here. Hormones. Hormones are expensive. They're not cheap. You've got psychologist appointments. I used to work for the government. My insurance, we had to do a negotiated settlement. My insurance paid 60%. I paid 40% because they weren't in the point of service plan. And they've offered to be in the point of service plan, but they're denied. So tell me discrimination isn't alive and well. Even in the government, I'm afraid. Wigs, facial surgery, breast implants, and sex reassignment surgery. It's all money, and it comes down to dollars and cents. So if you don't have a job, you're not going anywhere.
I know, Diane, that's one of the reasons why many who transition start out with a particular idea in mind for how long that process is going to take them. And then because of a lack of money or emergency circumstances that come up, things have to be put off. And the process takes even longer to accomplish because of lack of money or because of emergencies that come up and interfere with the process.
Number 2 reason, being impatient. I want it now. Transitioning person believes that once he transitions gender, life will be so much easier for him. Wrong answer. I used to get that when I was at the university. I had a young transsexual come up to me and tell me, "Oh, Dr. Kelly, once I transition, right now I'm going through a bitter divorce, but once that's behind me, I'm going to transition on the job and life is going to be so much better." Oh, he's a guppy swimming with a tank of barracudas. And he has no idea what he's getting into. It takes years of electrolysis and laser treatments to get rid of facial hair. And you've got to let the hair grow for several days before you have electrolysis so they can find it. Well, that's easier to do when you're still a male. You don't want to go in as a man with a full beard trying to have it removed. It looked kind of silly. And it takes lots of makeup to hide the beard that hasn't been removed. Hormones, they take time to change the body, generally 6 to 9 months, and it's not going to be reversible. You must live a minimum of 1 year in the opposite gender role before the surgeon's even going to look at you. And then depression. This sets in about 9 months into the hormones. And I'll tell you what, it's dangerous. Let's talk about depression. Depression, it's hard to keep a smile on your face when the transition is going so slowly. It just takes so long, you know? And suicide attempts among transgender people are very common. Last year I reported 1 in 12 transgender people will attempt suicide at least once, but honest to goodness, we really believe it's a lot higher than that, much higher. And depression is also from the hormones, and they don't realize it. They leave the male impotent and sterile. And this takes about 9 months. And at 9 months you begin to realize this, and if you're in the male thought mode, what's the most devastating thing for a man is when he can't have sex anymore. And so if you're in the male mode, that can be devastating, and that can lead to suicide attempt. So you've got to stay in the female mindset, and it'll be okay. Number 3 reason, letting fear dictate your life. Ask yourself, whose life is it anyway? If you control your own life, then fear won't be an issue for you. But if you hand responsibility over to your life to others, it's going to be a major factor preventing the transition. Fears. Let's talk about that for a minute. Fear of going out in public. What'll people think? That's a big one. Fear of rejection from friends, family, co-workers. Believe me, this happens. They will turn their back on you. Maybe not all of them, but some of them will definitely do it. Fear of ending up some sort of freak. No one will love you because you're weird and ugly. Well, maybe you are weird and ugly. Maybe they won't love you anyway. I don't know. But it's a fear, and fear is in the mind. Fear that one is a pervert or unnatural. I mean, it involves sex, so it must be dirty. It's self-indulgence, so you must be a weak person.
That's a very prevalent thought process, yes, in this country, especially.
Yes, it is. People they're afraid of a lot of things. Am I going to offend other people? You have to be your own person. That's basically what I'm saying. You have to be your own person. Number 4 reason, isolating yourself from others. Transition is a time when you need social contact. You need to be around others. You need more contact, not less. We all need friends. We all need social support. Now, if we left a baby in a room with no human contact at all, that baby would grow up to be lonely and dysfunctional. And it would be the same thing for a transgender person. You've got to have friends, and you've got to have a support structure. I advise people to join a support group, volunteer at a charity, volunteer at a gay lesbian support center. That's always very good. Buy a copy of How to Make Friends and Influence People. Actually read it and practice it. It'll help. Number 5 reason, this is a good one, fantasy expectations. Being a teenage sex kitten is not going to work. Mirrors are our worst enemy. You transition for you, not for anyone else. You do the transition, you don't do the transition to please somebody else. You do it because it's what you feel inside. And that's why you do it. Number 6 reason, refusal to deal with the medical community. You will need to be in counseling at the time of your gender surgery. That's a must. You'll need letters from 2 psychologists recommending the surgery. One has to have a PhD in transgender psychology, and the other has to have a minimum of a master's degree. And you'll need a good endocrinologist to be on those hormones too. And lastly, you'll need to see one of those 28 surgeons in the world and show them the letters and the fact that you've lived full-time for a year in order to get his or her acceptance for your surgery. So you have to deal with the medical community, no way around it. Number 7, and this is a big one, addictions. Any addiction will sabotage a transition. A shopaholic. If you keep buying these things that you feel you need, even if it's on sale, you'll never have money to complete your transition. Sex addiction, that's another one. Or being in a relationship, no matter how unpleasant. If it's an unpleasant relationship, get out of it.
That's a very good way to sabotage your support system before it even begins.
Oh, amen. I've got a patient right now that is doing just this. And he's finally agreed he's going to move out. But she runs him down, she belittles him, and then he wonders why he's having trouble going full time. Well, that's why. So playing the slots, lottery tickets, stuff like that, you're running out of money, you're gambling it away, you're not going to get rich doing that, forget it. Eating at restaurants every day. My patient is, one of my patients is doing that all the time. And his girlfriend gets him to take her out for supper every night. So he never has money. He's got creditors banging on the door after him. He'll never have money for a transition until he puts an end to this. So any kind of an addiction, that'll stop you from having the money to complete what you need to do. They cost money, they divert you from more constructive endeavors. Feeding an addiction of any type won't allow you to put money away for the surgery. And you'll have trouble making a plan for your transition, and even more trouble following it. You'll be constantly sidetracked.
And I think that's a really important point too. I wonder how often it occurs to people who are considering transition to sit down and plan out the steps ahead of time and where they're going to get the resources for each of those steps when they need them, and start working on them in advance and trying to build connections and network. And I wonder how many people think like that when they confront the idea of transition.
There's very few. When I was at the university, they asked us questions of this nature. And I set out a detailed plan that covered 7 years, and I explained it to the group. And I looked at the head professor and I said, what's the matter? They're all standing there with their mouth open. Not one in that group thought that way, not even the professor. And I said, I do everything that way. I want to plan out long range. Where am I going to be 7 years from now? How am I going to get there? I knew every step of the way.
Especially when it comes to something so large and life-changing.
Yes.
It alters every aspect of your existence on this planet. And if you don't think about it in those terms, you're likely to not realize how important the planning and the steps are.
Correct. Let's go to number 8, internalized homophobia. In movies, the guy hates queers, beats them up, and in the end, he turns out to be gay. He just couldn't face that fact. In transgender people, there may be a self-loathing which is acted out in binges and purges of female clothing. I think we've all done that. He cannot decide what gender he wants to be. And you'll need counseling to get over this one. It's not one that you can just wipe out. It may be very deep-seated. So.
It's something that I go through even as a drag queen.
Oh, sure.
Knowing that I'm never going to transition. I have no intention of doing that. That's not appropriate for me. But even as a drag queen, I do exactly the same thing. Have done it many times.
Number 9, inability to shed male behavior patterns. Males tend to be very competitive. My hard drive is bigger than your hard drive. You know that. And women tend to take up very little psychic space when in a room. You watch, men tend to take up a lot of psychic space. Their arms are spread out, so are their legs. His voice fills the room. His personality dominates. The conversation revolves around him. A male grows up learning to be aggressive, domineering, competitive, and loud. And now that has to be unlearned. Got to unlearn all of that. Reason number 10 is poor presentation. Many dress like either their mothers or hookers, and this is a fact. When a young girl reaches puberty,
I clearly was not prepared for that.
Oh no. Well, when a young girl reaches puberty, think about this now. She has sisters or a mother that guide her you know, through the puberty, through those stages. But a transgender person starts to experiment, and he has no guidance, or she has no guidance. So the role model seems to be his mother or some hookers that he's seen in some bars. Result is that the male to female transsexual dresses like either a dowdy old lady in a flowered dress, or squeezes into micro, mini, and 6-inch heels. And I've seen this so many times.
And I'm not going to tell you which one fits me better. I'm not going to talk about that.
What about voice? I mean, male to female will need to spend months working with a speech pathologist for voice therapy. You have to change your voice. It's just what you have to do. Conclusions. Now, for a successful transition of gender, you will need to have a plan in place, money to accomplish the goals, stick with the plan, have a transgender sensitivity trainer for your coworkers, that would be you, or somebody else,
or
your
else,
therapist.
but that's the role you have often played.
This is something you do not do yourself, and we had talked about that before for legal reasons. And avoid the 10 pitfalls that we just talked about for self-undermining your own transition.
Wow. Diane, this is wonderful.
Thank you.
It's
I had so much fun doing
It's not only fun to listen to, but it's wonderful because I'm sure that it's designed, I'm sure that it has the effect of jarring our thought process.
Yep.
And causing us to think in different ways and understand how necessary having a roadmap for yourself is.
The thing is on something like this, these are 10 ways that you undermine yourself in a gender transition, but there are also 10 ways that you can undermine yourself in real life.
That's right.
Anybody, whether they're transgender or not,
That's right.
tends to undermine themselves in probably most of these 10 ways.
I would agree. I think that's very true. In interpersonal relations with other people, in just any type of interaction. I think before we go, and I want to touch a little bit on a couple of the steps that are associated with transitioning and some of the suggestions for how to proceed, some of the laws that are in place. This information has been provided for us by Outfront Minnesota, and I'm going to give one of these to you and have you share your voice with us so that it isn't just me, Blabbermouth Martiqua. This one focuses on changing your driver's license as you're going through your transition. Despite current concerns about the effect of the REAL ID Act, the state of Minnesota continues to permit a person to change the gender listed on their driver's license or ID card. In October of 2003, the Department of Public Safety notified its staff statewide that people interested in making this change would now need to request a variance or an exception from the typical rules. The variance process is generally for those who have not had surgery. It appears that people who can document having had surgery or having amended their birth record may secure this change at the local driver's license office. So you can get a request form by either visiting the Driver and Vehicle Services website, which we will post at the bottom of the page, at the bottom of the screen for you, and go to select driver's license forms and then petition a variance for Minnesota rules. That's how you will get to the proper form, and you can print it out from there. The form is to be completed and sent or taken to the main office in St. Paul with a processing fee of $10. Please note that local driver's license offices do not accept these requests and do not always have correct information on this process. So it helps you to be informed of that possibility so that you're not too shocked if you walk in the door thinking you're prepared and they tell you no anyway. Let's see. If you have additional questions or for further information, you can contact the Outfront Minnesota Legal Program at legal@outfront.org, and the website information for the Department of Public Safety and the form is, we'll give it to you. I don't know where it is. Cut that. Oh, here it is. dps.state.mn.us.
I've got, mine is on amending your birth certificates, and since I've gone through this, I know this by heart. You've got to have documentation over a 7-year period to do it, and there's a whole lot of rigmarole to changing your birth certificate, but there's an easy way around all of this. What you do is you go to the judge, and you have a hearing, and you supply the judge with the letter that states that your surgery was complete. That's number one, and your original birth certificate. And then you ask the judge to amend the birth certificate and the gender marker, both. You want to get both done. I forgot about the gender marker, and I had to go back and do that. But once that's done, it's complete. Then you can you get a court order signed by the judge. You present that to the Office of Vital Statistics, and they will amend your birth certificate. Now, they'll create a new birth certificate that says female at time of birth. However, your original birth certificate will still remain on file, because let's say you're pulled over and arrested for something. Law enforcement, FBI, CIA, they all have a right to look at your original birth certificate. That one still has to be on file, but that'll only be viewable by somebody in law enforcement. Anybody else that wants to check on your birth certificate would be given the one that says female at time of birth.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
You referred to the term gender marker, and requesting that that be changed as well. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What is the gender marker and where would it be found?
Gender marker is with Social Security, and gender marker states male or female.
On
all of your documents.
On all of your documents.
Yeah, if you don't change it, I'll give you an example. You go and you apply for a job, say at Walmart, okay? And you haven't changed the gender marker, but you did change your name, it'll come back with your new name, and it'll say male. And then you got some explaining to do to Human Resources, so change the gender marker at the same time, and that's after your surgery.
Thank you. I was confused about that, so I'm guessing that people in our audience might be too. And now I understand how that would be a little confusing for everyone.
I never even knew about this, and I was applying for promotions within the government that I was working for, and when I didn't get them, I'd get a letter, "Dear Mr. Kelly." And I says, "Who's Mr. Kelly? I'm not married." And then they said, "Nope, it's a gender marker. We'll change it here." But then I also went and I had it changed with Social Security. So now all my records are changed. And it's best when you do a transition like that. I went back and meticulously changed every single record, every school I ever went to. I mean, I can't change the degrees. They're still issued in my old name. But everything else has been changed. Everything. Credit cards, driver's license, birth certificates, you name it. I changed everything.
If that isn't a good example of why a plan and a roadmap is necessary, because there's so many sources for gender information about each one of us. And if we don't think about each one of those and approach the gender marker in general, and then check everything specifically to make sure, we might miss something. And you might end up creating a problem for yourself that you didn't anticipate.
One good resource on this is that book, True Selves, that we talked about on the other show. That's an excellent resource that talks about doing a lot of this stuff.
Wonderful. We'll make sure that that information is shown on the screen then too, so that they can access that as a resource also. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. And the final piece of information that I have to share is basic GLBT human rights protections that exist currently in the state of Minnesota. And, okay, The Minnesota Human Rights Act was amended in 1993 to prohibit many forms of discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. And the broad definition of sexual orientation made it the nation's first state civil rights law to protect transgender individuals from discrimination. Sexual orientation is defined very broadly, and because of that, it allows for leeway in determining which group of rights you qualify for. Is that not accurate?
I believe it is.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I understood that. Under Minnesota law, discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation is generally prohibited in employment, including labor union membership, real property, meaning housing, public accommodations, public services, meaning those provided by the government, education, including private secular schools, credit, and business contracting. However, it also contains various exceptions when it comes to sexual orientation. That is, areas where discrimination is still legal, and it's important to be aware of those specific areas. Youth serving agencies, employees, or volunteers only, focusing on the private nonprofit side of things, duplex rentals, religious institutions, applying to education, employment, housing, real property, or use of facilities, but not to secular business activities unrelated to the institution's purpose. Meaning, you can rent out a religious hall as a transgender person and be protected legally because it's a private endeavor. But if you are involved with a religious institution directly, they can still discriminate against you if their belief system warrants it, as far as they're concerned. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you. You're helping me to make sure.
Okay.
Because I'm not entirely certain. Okay. If you believe you have experienced discrimination, you can call the Department of Human Rights, or you can visit their website, humanrights.state.mn.us, for further information, or go to outfront.org for their information. Diane, thank you so much for bringing this material to us today, sharing it with us, giving us a chance to see how important planning, organizing, and mapping out your transition is, and the ways in which you can be tripped up legally and otherwise if you are not organized and do not have a support system behind you to make sure of your success. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, dear.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Please come back and visit us again. Bye now.